Furthermore, when analysing some of the data provided by Padel Intelligence, one can see that Paquito has actually stepped up his game against the best pairs. We've always said that one of the great things about Tapia is how all-rounded he is, and obviously his attacking is one of the best, but I always thought that his defending is one of the best, if not the best, and the data is literally proving it.
Difference in offense is probably not that substantial, but I think defensively Tapia is definitely that bit better. Coelho has been receiving more volume, and the fact that they're still winning, it just shows that obviously Coelho is having a massive influence, because if not, they wouldn't be winning as much.
And I think his smashing in particular has seen a huge improvement. So it's probably what he suffered with the most last season, and the stats this time, actually courtesy of Padel Up, show that he only concedes one counter-attack on smash per match.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Padel Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional padel, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 47, and as always, joined by my co-host Hugo. It's great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. Cheers, guys. Hope you're having a lovely weekend. And well, yeah, firstly, apologies for my voice. It's a bit croaky today. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't affect the episode, and then doesn't make you guys stop listening after a couple of minutes. But yeah, really excited for today's episode because, we have developed our top 5 rankings in terms of this season's best players so far. Am I not mistaken, Gons?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think maybe it's important to point out that it's an individual ranking, so it's not pair ranking. So I think that at least on my side, is something that I've been weighting a lot more is really that individual aspect, because obviously the results are very important, but it's a team sport. So you have to take into account that when you're probably thinking about an individual ranking, the sort of individual stats probably just weigh a little bit more than the overall result, as the overall result is influenced by the two players, essentially.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really, even though padel is a team sport and a pair sport, I think it's really important and really great that now that we have access to individual data and player level data, that we can actually analyze and discuss, and that hopefully our listeners have their own views, and maybe they can share them. Maybe they can share their own top 5s regarding their current rankings in terms of this season's best players so far. It'd be great to see them. So yeah, just very excited to get cracking and mainly see who you've placed as the MVP so far.
Yeah, and maybe as well important to highlight to our audience is that we don't know each other's ranking. So I don't know who Hugo has as his top 5. He doesn't know who I have as my top 5. So it'll be interesting to see where we agree, and more importantly, where we disagree. So yeah, maybe shall we kick it off? I think probably best if we start from the 5th, obviously. And maybe we each give, so maybe you can start and then I'll go if that works.
100%. Yeah, I'll kick it off with my 5th best player so far. And it's none other than Paquito Navarro. So I think that he's playing some of the best padel that he's ever played, to be honest, which is why I'm so excited about his upcoming partnership with Juan Lebron. Can't wait to watch them next week in Brussels. Well, the reasoning is, firstly, the player score rankings developed by our colleagues from Padel Up, and I'll take the chance and the opportunity to say hi to them. They're doing a great job, and it'd be great to eventually, have another episode and where they come as guests and we have another chat, because we really enjoyed it the first time. But basically, the rankings put together by them, the player score rankings so far this season, place Paquito right up there with the best players, and actually is the number 1 player after the first 3 tournaments, so before Puerto Cabello was played. Furthermore, when analysing some of the data provided by Padel Intelligence, one can see that Paquito has actually stepped up his game against the best pairs. So his scores against his his scores regarding his overall level of play and the mental side of the game have actually been even better against when playing against the best pairs, which I find pretty amazing. And also, having looked at Padel Intelligence's famous chart analyzing players' winners versus unforced errors throughout the first 4 tournaments of the season, that chart puts Paquito within the top 3 players right now, mainly because he generates, as we all very much know, a lot of winners and doesn't commit a lot of unforced errors. So I basically had to put him in my top 5. Guns, what do you think? Who's your 5th best player?
No, I just have to say I do really like that option. And I'll give you a little hint. I also have Paquito in my top 5, but he's actually not number 5. So you can already see how highly I value his start of the season. And let me go with my number 5, which might surprise you. And that is none other than Miguel Yanguas. And I think that he's had an absolutely brilliant start of the season. If we go over, his best result has been a final at a Doha Major where they had to go over Juan Lebron and Ale Galan in that famous, very spicy / dramatic match. And then they beat Los Super Pibes as well. And Yanguas was like an absolute key piece for the pair to get to that final. The strategy they implemented, he was so aggressive defensively. He was incredible, like just playing all the lobs to Juan Lebron. I remember that match. Like it was really the strategy, I think, was really led by Yanguas. And at the net, he was incredibly aggressive. And I think maybe this will shock you if you're not aware. I'm sure you are. But in anyways, I think it's worth highlighting. But their worst result is a round of 16 exit, but that's because at Puerto Cabello, they had to retire. So in reality, if you really take that off, and they would have faced Leos Burger and Tino Livac. So arguably, I think that's a good match for them to win. If you take that off, their worst result is a quarterfinal. So that's incredibly impressive. Best result is a final at a major. Worst result is essentially a quarterfinal. And some of the stats, he's the number 1 rated in terms of percentage of forced errors in defense with 0.7%. And he's number 2 in smash defenses. So that's getting a smash back. So I think just shows you that from a defensive perspective, he's been absolutely top notch. And I think offensively as well, he's really stepped up his game. And you can see in the results that they're having. So yeah, for me, Miguel Yanguas, the 5th best player so far this season.
You know what? It's perfect timing because my 4th best player is Miguel Yanguas.
No way.
It is indeed. I was very torn between Miguel Yanguas and Paquito Navarro within the 4th, 5th position. I actually had them the other way around before. But yeah, so my 4th best player so far is Miguel Yanguas. In my eyes, he's probably this season's most improved player. I mean, you've already mentioned a lot of it, so I don't want to go on too much, but yeah, his partnership with Garrido so far is proving to be one of the strongest and probably the pair beyond the top 4 right now that the rest don't want to face. Their results have obviously been incredible. They're one of the only pairs that have beaten both Lebron Galan and Stupadineno this season. I assume the only other pair that's done it, Lebron Galan probably did it, and Tapia Coello. So it's pretty amazing. And yeah, the reason why I'm going for Yanguas ahead of Garrido is because I think he's been slightly better and almost like the leader in terms of play and even attitude at some points of the match, the matches and the tournaments. And yeah, when looking at the data, as you mentioned, provided by Padel Intelligence, he's been the best defender so far. And he has very similar numbers to Chingoto in terms of unforced errors, which is amazing because Chingoto is the king at that. So yeah, it's great to see. And also, as you mentioned, he's been super proficient in attack. And for example, in the game in Doha, he was generating so many winners through his Bibora and really aggressive net play. He was actually managing to get a lot of por cuatros as well, so smashing the ball out the back of the court. So yeah, amazing season so far from Mike Yanguas. And I think his ceiling and the pair's ceiling is still higher up. So can't wait to watch them.
Yeah, that's actually really took me by surprise, and but I'm glad that we're both sort of in the same in a similar wavelength. And I guess you had Paquito number 5, and I had Yanguas number 5. Now you have Yanguas number 4, so obviously I have Paquito at number 4. Again, I'll go maybe some different stats because you've already highlighted some really good points as to why Paquito has had an incredible start to the season. His results haven't necessarily been like eye-watering or eye-popping. So his best results semi-finals, but he's obviously been having to go against Coelho and Tapia, which at the moment is just basically impossible to go through. And his worst result was the sort of first round knockout in Riyadh in the first tournament. But I guess you can have a bit of an excuse there. It's the first tournament, first time he was officially playing with Sanyo, start of the season. But when you look at it from like an individual perspective, and I think this is what I was really trying to say at the beginning, that at the end of the day, what we're doing here is an individual ranking. So what really matters is that sort of individual aspect, the stats, like how are the players doing. So you highlighted the unforced errors percentage and the winners, where Paquito is like very comfortably sitting at the top with some of the players. But some other stats as well. He's in the top 10 in terms of points won after serve. He's a top 10 percentage of forced errors in defense. So he's essentially he's in the top 10 of fewest amount of errors. And he's number 4 in important points. Now, these are all stats provided by Padel Intelligence. And if you remember, or for our audience, the important points were either those break points or like deuce. So I think, and you sort of alluded to this, Hugo, the fact that from a mental perspective, he's really stepped up against the best pairs. So I think he's basically in the top 10 in every single stat. So yeah, I just don't think that you can overlook this. And for me, Paquito sits well at number 4. But I will say it hasn't been easy, because it obviously means that we've left out some very decent players as well who have had better results in a way. But just looking at it from an individual perspective, he has had an incredible start so far.
I totally agree. I just think that when looking, and that's literally the reason why I'm so excited about Paquito teaming up with LeBron. I mean, we know that LeBron has probably been Padel's best player in terms of, well, regarding the modern era. So the last 6-7 years, he's been number 1 for for 4 out of the last 5. And he was also affected by injury the only season that so far he hasn't been the number 1 ranked player. And now he's going to team up with Paquito, who is probably in the best form of his life. And individually, he's just, when you look at the data, he's just right up there, competing with Coelho, Tapia, Galan, LeBron, everyone. So, well, above LeBron, actually. So, yeah, so excited to watch him. And actually, I was just thinking that maybe when we finish our top 5, we could have a couple of just quick mentions in terms of honourable mentions, because I think there's probably a couple of players that probably feel a bit hard done by in terms of us leaving them out. But yeah, if you think the time's right, I'll crack on with my 3rd best player. So starting with the podium so far, and the 3rd best player so far for me has been fan favourite Agustín Tapia. So, I mean, to be honest, it's impossible not to have Tapia in my top 5, and probably impossible for anyone not to have him in the top 5. But you may be a bit surprised that I placed him in 3rd position. I think that he's having a sensational start to the season. He's back to his best, and probably the best thing about his current form is that even though the data shows that he's actually receiving slightly less volume of play compared to Coelho, which, well, a reason for that is probably, hey, we're not going to play the ball to Tapia because he is the best player in the world or one of the best players in the world. But when it comes to key points and moments in matches, he's always delivering, going for the risky shots and going for the risky plays that, and those decisions and those moments are almost always paying off. So, yeah, I think his start to the season has been incredibly impressive. The data shows, well, data once again, courtesy of Padel Intelligence. So, I mean, they're literally putting this episode together. Padel Intelligence are. So, thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Vianney. But yeah, he's been the best server on tour so far this season, alongside Coelho. So, I mean, I think he's actually ranked second, but the data is almost identical. So, the best server or the second best server. He's won 3 out of the 4 tournaments played so far this season and made the final in the other tournament. So you'll obviously remember, but when Dabian Cuellar faced Lebron Galan in Riyadh in the season's opening tournament. And regarding a couple of other stats that I thought were really interesting, he's been the 4th best defender this season. Now, we've always said that one of the great things about Dabia is how all-rounded he is. And obviously his attacking is one of the best, but I always thought that his defending is one of the best, if not the best, and the data is literally proving it. And well, apart from his defending, obviously we know, I just mentioned the stat about his serving being the best so far. His smashing is obviously one of the best. He's in the top 10, 15 players in terms of his smashing. And yeah, I mean, those are the reasons. I think I could go through many, many more, but yeah, I think, well, we'll see later. You'll see the players that I placed above him. You may know already, or you may have an idea. But yeah, that's the reason why Dabia is the 3rd best player so far this season for me.
Yeah, I can't really fault that because I had a very similar conundrum. It's been a very tough decision who I put at number 3. And I'm actually going to go with Coelho, Tapia's partner. And I'm not going to lie, it was incredibly tough. You've mentioned a lot of the stats regarding both of them. So in terms of results, no denying they've been the best pair, like winning 3 out of 4 tournaments and making the final of the other tournament. So yeah, being your worst result, a final, is just really incredible. And in terms of the stats, as you say, when you look at Coelho and Tapia in terms of serves, is it pretty much a wash? They're both just like 1 and 2 in terms of points won after their serve. So yeah, there's really no difference there. In terms of smashing, so Coelho just outside the top 10. He's top 10 in terms of defense, but as you said, Tapia is slightly better. And then in terms of points won, so smash defense, so essentially points won after a smash or getting back a smash, he's 15th. Now, I feel like I really like number 3 for me is still incredible, and I really don't want to disrespect Coelho because he's had an unbelievable start to the season. Like I mentioned, I think this has been incredibly tough for me to decide. Like honestly, until really last moments, I wasn't really sure if Coelho should be there. It should be a number 3 or should be higher. And we've both mentioned, I think, throughout a lot of episodes where we discussed the tournaments, how Coelho has been a fundamental piece to them this season, especially when we look at how he's the end of last season, where I feel like we both felt that Coelho probably dropped a bit more than Tapia, and that's why sort of they had a bit of a worse ending than they had at the beginning of the season. But I really do think that this season both of them have been stellar, and Coelho at many points has been it's sort of carrying the pair. But I think ultimately for me, what this has decided it is as you mentioned, sort of Tapia being in those sort of moments, in those key moments, just being that bit better, that sort of like carrying the pair and being the leader of the pair. So that's why I feel like for me, Tapia has had a better start of the season, if you can put it in a way, than Coelho. But regardless, Coelho's been absolutely amazing, and he's my 3rd best player so far.
So it seems like you've given me a sneak peek into the fact that Tapia might be the number 1 or number 2 ranked player in your ranking.
Yeah, potentially.
Well, there you go. Well, I think, is it your go? Is it your go to go for number 2?
I can go if you want.
Whatever. Yeah, go for it.
All right. So at number 2 is none other than Mr. Ale Galan. And
Interesting.
his best results, they won Riyadh, first tournament of the season. The worst result was a round of 16 exit at Doha. But even though the results they've been decent, they haven't been stellar for what they're probably used to. But from a individual statistical perspective, he's actually probably been the best player. And I think so. Number four in terms of serves won after point. He's the number four in smashing. He's the eighth best defender. So in terms of percentage of forced errors, he's the eighth best smash defender. So winning points after the smash, and he's got the highest percentage of winners out of all players on tour, with also a quite moderate unforced error percentage. So I mean, those stats are just like absolutely ridiculous. And that is why he's a number two. And to be honest, the only reason why he's not a number one is just maybe is that results where it's like the other player, like there's obviously the biggest elephant in the room where they've had like such incredible results that you can't just forget about them when I think from a stats perspective and stuff, they're so close. And I think for me as well, maybe something that has like influenced it a bit was the last tournament. So when I look at Puerto Cabello and in the final, Ale Galan was probably not at his best, and he was the worst, for example, out of all the four players that played. And the person, which I'm pretty sure you already know who is, that is ahead of him, was better. So when we look at it from like a head to head perspective in that sense. So yeah, I mean, either way, Galan, he's been just absolutely amazing, and he's at number two for me.
To be honest, I really was not expecting this, which is the reason why I thought, hey, I'll let you go. Also, because given that I was going first every time, I was kind of stealing your stats and I felt bad. So,
No, go for it.
and anyway, yeah, very, very surprised. I honestly, I didn't expect it. I'll go for my number two. As you can imagine, well, you may not, but my number two is Arturo Goya. So so the reason why I placed him above Tapia is that I think that recently he's been receiving more volume of play as Padel Intelligence, as Padel Intelligence's data shows, more volume of play than Tapia. And so I think that essentially, at least in my eyes, what that almost means is that he's more at fault for for this season's results so far than Tapia. Only just. At least you could kind of see that in a way. And well, when you look at Panel Intelligence's chart regarding players' winners versus unforced errors, the one that we've already mentioned, it puts Coelho ahead of Tapia so far this season. And well, he's really recovered his best version. The form that he showed for the first half of last year when he and Tapia were unplayable. Again, best server on tour alongside Tapia. And I think his smashing in particular has seen a huge improvement. So it's probably what he suffered with the most last season, and the stats this time, actually courtesy of Paddle Up, show that he only concedes one counter attack on his smash per match. So what that means is when you smash and the ball goes up, trying to get back into your own court, but the other player manages to run up to the net and smash it out por cuatro or just win the point. And I'm pretty sure that towards the end of last season, when I was looking at the data, it was like 2 or 3 times per match. So I think it's pretty amazing given how many smashes players go for in matches and Coelho actually goes for in matches. So yeah, basically the reason that I've gone for him above Tapia, which you can imagine has been one of the toughest decisions in my life, is that I think he's probably been slightly more consistent. And yeah, I just think that maybe what's kind of edged it for me is that my expectations for Tapia are a little bit higher than Goyo. And so far this season, they've probably been very, very even. So that's probably why. But yeah, maybe I'm not making too much sense, but hopefully I am. But yeah, Goyo number 2 for me.
So I guess that leads us with the number 1 spot left. And For me, it's been none other than Agustin Tapia. I mean, the results speak for themselves. We've already mentioned won 3 out of 4 tournaments, and the other tournament that they didn't win, they made the final. In terms of stats, I would say overall potentially slightly better than Coelho in terms of in defense and smashing ability. And I think as well those key moments and those important points, Tapia has been a bit better. But I think, like I was mentioning when I was speaking about Coelho, it's been really tough because it could really go either ways. I really like your argument that Coelho has been receiving more volume, and the fact that they're still winning, it just shows that obviously Coelho is having like a massive influence, because if not, they wouldn't be winning as much. And he's definitely improved. I also have to acknowledge that Coelho has, in terms of percentage of winners and percentage of unforced errors, in the graph that Padel Intelligence provide us, he is sitting better in both metrics than Tapia, just slightly, but better. But ultimately, I think for me, it's just really that those key moments that Tapia has been able to really deliver on, and in terms of, I think as well, the difference. For example, I feel like the difference in offense is probably not that like substantial, but I think defensively Tapia is definitely that bit better. So for me, really, that's what has edged it, and those important points, as I was mentioning. But really tough. I mean, it really can go either way. So yeah, Tapia for me, the best player so far.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, water's wet, right? I assume that a lot of people would have expected that. And to be honest, a lot of people will expect that my number one player so far this season is Alejandro Galan. Now, yeah, I mean, it's been just so tough. And initially, I'm already amazed that we've gone for exactly the same 5 players. So, hey, credit where credit's due, eh?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the reasons why I've gone for Galan. So the stats pretty much show that he's been a level above everyone else, at least in my eyes. When you look at that chart that I was mentioning about winners versus unforced errors, I mean, he's literally down in the bottom right corner on his own, just in his own level, at his own level, in his own. Yeah. So it was hard for me to overlook that. Now, it is true that if I'm not mistaken, I think the chart did take into account Venezuela, right? Puerto
Yeah.
Cabello. I think it did. So yeah. So, but I mean, looking at the other kind of data streams and stats that I've found really insightful and kind of edged it for me. So he's been the 4th best server so far this season, and that's taking into account that obviously he was playing with Juan Lebron, who's been playing really well, but obviously still not as consistent as he used to be. And they lost in the quarterfinals of, it was Doha, right, against Garrido and Yanguas. So still being the 4th best server, having had not the best results overall, is pretty amazing. He's also the 4th best smasher and the 8th best defender. Now that really surprised me. So, I mean, he's basically in the top 10 or top 15 in all the rankings that I've looked at. And that's basically why I think that right now he's probably the best player in the world, which is something that a lot of people have been talking about. We heard Seba Nerone in a recent interview with, was it Mejora tu Padel? So the guys who were previously 2010. And he was saying that, yeah, Galan in his eyes has been the best player this season so far. And basically the end of last season, so probably the last third of last year. And I do agree. And I think he's continued that form. And now I feel a bit bad because Dappy has my best player and I placed him 3rd. So maybe I've been a bit of a data geek and I've been too stuck to the data, because I do totally agree that when the key moments of matches have arrived, Tapia has delivered every single time. So it was hit and miss between him and Goya for the 2nd spot. But even though I do agree that Galan probably let him and Chingoto down a little bit towards the end of their match in the final against Tapia and Coelho in Puerto Cabello, I thought that he was the main reason why they won that first set against Tapia and Coelho. And he, in Riyadh, when him and LeBron won the tournament against Tapia and Coelho in the final, he was the main man. Or, well, LeBron actually delivered in terms of his smashing in the key moments of the match, but Galan was obviously carrying the pair. And throughout that tournament, his smashing was, I don't think I've ever seen a player with such proficient smashing in a tournament. That's the best I've ever seen. So I just couldn't overlook it. And yeah, Galan number one for me, but we'll see how this changes. And yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Gons?
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like how we both have the same players, different positions, and with slightly different arguments. Because I really think that it just shows how close they are. Because I really think you could argue for the top three. Essentially, I think you could
Yeah.
really argue any of them could be number one, two, or three. And I completely get your argument. Like, it's true when you look at the data, Galan is really the only player that sits not only in the top 10, but like comfortably in the top 10 in basically every single category and leading some crazy categories, like, for example, percentage of like the highest percentage of winners. So it's really tough, like, not to think or see that Alan is the best player, but just the on my side, I couldn't overlook the results. Like it when it's like so substantial in terms of, I know at the beginning I mentioned like this is more of an individual ranking, but the results are so overwhelmingly better, if you see what I mean, in terms of Tapia and Coelho, and then the points around the important points for Tapia and the head to head and Galan's like last tournament in the final where he was potentially the worst player. So yeah, I guess at this level, they're just you're almost looking for the tiniest of differences that really see where the edge is, because like like I said, you can just argue that any of these three players are the best player in the world right now. But I think but like all the three of them have had an incredible level so far, and we'll see how they continue throughout the season. Obviously, Galan is going to be the most interesting one because he's got a new partner, and we'll have to see how he adjusts to that and how his stats look after a couple of tournaments with Chingoto. And but yeah, it's been really fun doing this, and yeah, I'm also it was quite fun hearing all the players and your arguments as well, Hugh. I think you did a pretty good job, I must say.
Yeah, likewise, Gons. I think you did a great job. I've really enjoyed it. And Dabia, if you're listening or if you ever watched this episode, please don't hate me. I still love you. You're still my favorite player. But yeah, I just had to go for something different this time. But it won't happen again. And just maybe to yeah,
I
finish it
like
off.
the yeah. Should we go on and do, as you mentioned, maybe the honorable mentions or the guys that we've disrespected for not including them in our top five?
100%, 100%. I'll crack on with the first one that I wanted to mention. And it's actually Alex Arroyo. So his results have been very, very consistent so far this season because, well, his partnership with Edu Alonso is proving to be really, really solid. They've made the quarterfinals in pretty much every tournament, if I'm not mistaken. And, well, Alex Arroyo individually has been, if I'm not mistaken, the best smasher so far this season, which is remarkable. I mean, having him above players like Tapia, Coelho, Galan, who famously are the best smashers on tour, just shows how proficient he's been. So, yeah, that would be my first honorable mention.
Fair. I do like it. I think for me, my first honorable mention has to be Stupa. When we look at a number of categories, he's pretty much in the top 10 in a lot of them. So in terms of serves, he's in the top 10. In terms of smashing, he's in the top 10 as well, which is potentially something people might find surprising, given that smashing is not like his greatest asset. but in terms of the mental category as well, so like the contribution score in key and in important points, he sits in the top 10 as well. And in smash defending as well, he's actually the fifth best. So he's doing really well in a lot of the categories that we've mentioned for a lot of the players. And in terms of results, they've had decent results as well. So we've mentioned in the past that they haven't made a final yet, but regardless, they've been basically making semifinals after semifinals. So still quite decent. It's just that both potentially they're lacking that sort of or we've just been accustomed to what they've been in terms of like starting the season really well, winning tournaments, making finals. So I feel like they're both of their games in terms of Stupa and Dineno still have to polish it a bit, and they've obviously lost some pretty big matches. Namely that semi-final against Yanguas and Garrido in the Doha, where they really weren't themselves. And for example, against Galan and Chingoto as well, I feel like that wasn't a good semi-final for them. And they really couldn't show like their game style and what they're about. But yeah, he for me sits maybe just outside the sort of top five.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear that Stulbaz within the top 10 best smashers so far, because I think I was thinking that his smashing so far this season, sorry, hasn't been as good as last season's. I mean, it is true that, to be fair, towards the end of last season, it was almost like him and Galan were the best at smashing, and I was just so impressed. So yeah, I think it's a great shout. And yeah, regarding Super Pibes, I know we've talked about them a lot, so I don't want to delve into their situation too much, well, too deep. But I think that we're probably being a little bit harsh on them, because the fact that they made the semi-finals in every tournament, and the fact that when you look at the matches they've either lost to Tapian Coelho or they've lost to Lebron Galan. Or it is true that what's really going to hurt them is that match against Yanguas and Garrido. It really will hurt them. But it is true that Yanguas and Garrido have probably been the best pair out of the best pairs. Like beyond the best pairs, they've been the best pair. And that match, one of the sets was a tie break. If that would have gone Stupa and Dineno's way, things could have changed. I'm convinced they would have. And in the game against Chingoto and Galan, again, that match in the semi-final of Porta Cabello was so even. They had the chance to go 5-4 up and serving in the first set because they were love 40 up and they didn't. So I think they've been lucky, and I think that they will, their luck in a way, because I think a big part in sport is luck as well. It will end up going their way at some point. So yeah, interesting shout. I think my only main other honourable mention is a pair. How good have they been? Pablo Cardona and Javi Ruiz have been honestly sensational. They've won both Ultimate Padel Tour tournaments so far this season. And I know they haven't played the best pairs in the world throughout those tournaments, but just winning both of them is really impressive. And Pablo Cardona's finally showing that consistency in his game that was pretty much the only thing that he was lacking. And Javi Ruiz is towards the end of his career, and he's playing probably some of the best paddle he's ever played. So I didn't want to finish the episode without mentioning them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I really like that pair and the job that they're doing. And yeah, I think arguably both of them, Javi Ruiz and Cardona, are just playing the best paddle of their careers. Javi Ruiz actually was so emotional when they won their first Ultimate Paddle Tour event, because that was, I think, his first ever actual competitive professional trophy or tournament. So yeah, incredible that at his age, I mean, he's been around the blocks for ages, and it's absolutely amazing that at his age they're able to win those events and playing against some really good pairs as well. So yeah, I think I'm really excited to see where their season goes, and really excited as well to see how Cardona develops. And then maybe for me, lastly, I'm gonna go with Lebron. Now I actually had a bit of a tough like choice in terms of number four. Actually, I was thinking, should I go with Lebron or should I go with Paquito? Ultimately, yeah, Paquito in terms of his stats just couldn't overlook those. But I think LeBron as well. The results have been decent. They've obviously won a tournament, and and I think that he's also sits in sort of the top 10 in some categories as well. So and like in the top 15. So in terms of smashing, we mentioned that his smashing is sort of seems like he's back, or he's in the top 15 there. In terms of serving, he's the third best in terms of points won directly from serve. So I think overall he's been playing good, but yes, ultimately he couldn't be in my top five because I do think that a lot of the good results have really come from Galan's performances. And yeah, they obviously had that big round of 16 exit against the Yanguas and Garrido, which I think ultimately felt really on LeBron's shoulder. I feel not only because of the sort of drama side of things and potential heat of the moment, emotions letting your way, but we can see from a paddle and tactical perspective, that's who Yanguas and Garrido were really targeting. So yeah, I still think it's an honorable mention. And I'm really excited to see how this sort of ranking develops. Maybe we should do one I guess, at the half of the season, because with the new pairs, I think there's going to be some changes. I think it'll be very interesting. And then we've obviously got Los Super Pibes who potentially will get better. We've seen that their game is becoming more aggressive. So maybe that's going to start to pay off. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that if we do it halfway through the season, we're going to have very different rankings.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think they will be different. The only thing is, do you see Galan, Coelho, or Tapia leaving the top five? Because to be honest, my initial thought is maybe Coelho, but I I don't know. The only whether Galan Chingoto doesn't go as well as people expect that ranking, so maybe not. But yeah, I love. I 100% want to do that mid-season ranking once again to see how things change, because one out of Stupandineno will 100% be in the top five by then. I'm convinced, and I'd be very surprised if Lebron's not in the top five. So yeah, great shout regarding Juan Lebron. He would have definitely been in my top 10 if this was a top
Yeah,
10.
I certainly agree with that. But yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. Potentially, Paquito could make a surge into sort of the podium as per se.
100%. And actually, just a last quick one. I think if we didn't mention Javi Garrido, he would probably kill us. But yeah, I mean, as we've said, him and Yanguas have been sensational, and he's a big reason for that. And a really interesting stat and piece of data that I came across once again, courtesy of Palin Intelligence, shock. He's been the second best player so far this season in terms of mental. So I don't know, because that's what they call the ranking. Paddle Intelligence have a mental ranking. I don't really know that. I assume that takes into account performance during key points in matches, etc.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, I think he was ranked second.
it's the contribution score in those important points. So if you remember, the contribution score was a sort of addition of, so you've got positive points in terms of
Yep.
winners, or you assist your teammate who then finishes the point, and then you've got negative like you get points deducted if you get an unforced error or a forced error, or if you leave an easy ball that then the opposition finishes on your teammate. So yeah, it's that contribution score, so the overall score of that player in terms of like in important points, so break points, 30, 40, 40, all of that. So yeah, incredible,
That's yeah.
because I think probably Garrido had this sort of stigma or like view of him of like, oh, he's great, but he's actually in important moments he's not that good, and like he's nervous and he's still young. So yeah, incredible to see that the data says otherwise.
100%. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think, well, the data proves that, well, because I would initially think that given that he's such an aggressive player, and given that a lot of the times in the key moments in matches he goes for a smash, the fact that he's right up there means that pretty much his smash is paying off pretty much every time. So yeah, pretty amazed to see that. And yeah, credit where credit's due.
Yeah, 100% brilliant start to the season as well. But yeah, I think that probably brings us along to the end of the episode. Like I mentioned, Hugo, has been really fun to do this with you, and yeah, I hope that all our listeners as well enjoyed this. And yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave your comments with your top five. It'd be great to see who you guys have in your top five. We probably, well, hopefully we haven't butchered it too much ourselves, but yeah, we'll catch you next time, and thanks for joining, Hugo, as always.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Cheers, Gons. Have a great rest of the week. Well, great rest of well, when you watch this, it will be great rest of the week. And yeah, catch you soon.